Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise.
Hey guys, thanks for joining me today, and I want to tell you about a new comic I found at the library. It's actually called a library collection for the Star Trek franchise, and I am absolutely flabbergasted that this exists and I didn't know about it. And if you're a Star Trek fan that hasn't read comics in a long time, this is something you're going to want to hear about and get for yourself. But before we get started, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this, as well as my other videos on faith, health, and beauty all year round. So this is called Star Trek. It's an IDW comic, library edition number 1. And it says volume 1, and then above that 741.5. It's listed as Star Trek Library Collection, a comprehensive line of books that will collect every Star Trek comic series published by IDW. So this is volume 1. And the back cover says, discover series you may have missed or revisit some old favorites from the original series, The Next Generation, Kelvin Timeline, Deep Space Nine, and more. Starting with the Kelvin Timeline and the prequel that led into the 2009 Star Trek movie, Countdown details the origin of mysterious Nero, the Romulan that ultimately threatened the survival of the entire universe. Then in Nero, find out what he did in those cold, dark, lonely years spent waiting for his nemesis to arrive. Both brought to you by Roberto Orsi, Alex Kurtzman, Mike Johnson, Tim Jones, and David Messina. In Spock Reflections, the follow-up to Countdown, discover what could drive a man to abandon all he knows and go live with the Federation's sworn enemy, his real motivations, and what brought him to this place in his life. A Vulcan on Romulan? Absurd, or is it? By Scott Tipton, David Tipton, and David Messina. So there you go. That is the quick summary of what's included, but it doesn't begin to tell you how fantastic these comic editions are. First, they're beautifully illustrated, glossy paper, just fantastic. Yes, I'm looking at it as we speak, and the illustrations are fantastic. When it says it's depicting a character, you recognize them immediately. You're not trying to figure out who that is because it doesn't look like them, like in some of the Scooby-Doo cartoons. But again, it's beautifully, beautifully illustrated. We get to see some old favorites such as Worf and Geordi and Data, Captain Picard, and we get to find out where they are now in our timeline. We get to find out what happened after Captain Kirk's actual death in the Star Trek movie when he helped Captain Picard to save the universe. And I always wondered, what happened? Did anyone tell Spock? Why didn't they tell the people? And I know they thought it was best not to say anything because he already been deemed dead and they didn't want to cause any trouble. But I really wondered what happened and if any of his crew members ever found out. And this book answers that question. I'm so happy with the story and what happened. You find out whom has gotten promotions, who's in commanding positions. We see a lot of action in here that really, again, is very well done. You get a lot of backstory on Spock, as well as what happened in the future. And Spock lived a long time. That was really interesting to find out in here. If you've watched any of the movies, you'll be happy to see some information from there. And there's even one story that mentions the original Star Trek characters in series. And I was really happy to see that too. There's also another one that tells us a little bit about the Pike timeline. And as you know, there's a new series that's going to delve us into what originally had been planned for Captain Pike if he had returned instead of us getting William Shatner. But I'm sorry, I love William Shatner. He's the captain, and I'm happy with how it ended up going. Now, granted, back when this came out, I wasn't alive. However, I've seen so many of these series, and I've watched the original and reruns many times. So I'm happy with the way that it went. And I do like being able to see another storyline with Pike, who was originally played by Jeffrey Hunter. And I read that he didn't return. He chose not to return for the role, which is why they casted William Shatner as another captain of the USS Enterprise. If you're a real big fan, like me, of Star Trek, this is a book you're going to want to start with. I saw online on Bing, there's just so many of these comics I didn't know existed. So there's a whole lot for you to delve into and be entertained by. It's so well written, so well done, so perfectly undertaken. I could not put this book down. I did not stop reading until I finished it, and then I said, Rascal, you got to read this, because this is unlike anything you've read for a comic. And she never read the Star Trek comic before, nor has she watched much of the series except for a few episodes and reruns. At one point, Netflix had not only the original series, but also all the other incarnations that came after, as well as the animated series. They're all gone from Netflix now. But that was a great time. I got to watch so many of these and see movies I'd never seen. It was a great time in Netflix history, and I wish they'd bring them all back. So, if you really like well-written stories, you love sci-fi, you're a Star Trek fan, maybe not a Trekkie, but a real huge fan, if you have not read anything about Star Trek or know anything about it, if you haven't watched any series, I would say this is a great book just to kind of whet your appetite and see what the franchise is all about. Maybe it will motivate you to try to watch from the beginning all the way through the current incarnation, which I think is called Star Trek Discovery. There's also an animated series for kids called Star Trek Prodigy, and amazingly, when they had the recent documentary, it wasn't mentioned like it didn't exist, but we've watched it and it's okay. So those of you who are Star Trek fans and you haven't read this, you got to get it. For those of you who already have read it and all the other comics, let me know in the comments below. Excuse me. And if you're not a Trekkie or a Star Trek fan and you're just curious about what the franchise offers, start with this book. You won't be disappointed. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this, as well as my other videos and Netflix reviews and reviews on manga and other things, as well as my videos on faith, health, and beauty all year round. Thanks so much for joining me. Continue to be happy, healthy, and whole, and see you next time. Live long and prosper.
I've got no captain and no first officer to replace him.
Yeah, we do.
You are capable of deciding your own destiny. The question is, which path will you choose?